Well, hello, I'm Megan. I'm really pleased to be with you, and I want to tell you a story. And you've probably heard this story before, but I'm gonna guess you've never heard it told this way. It's the story of a woman, here's my storybook, and a prophet, a leader, one of the judges of Israel. She's the supreme commander of the nation's army. She's a military leader, a civil leader, a spiritual leader. And in the middle of the story of the time before kings came to Israel, there is male hero after male hero, and then comes her voice. Speaking for God, speaking out the story, and she sings the number one hit song, a duet with Barak. It's one of the compelling stories that come together in the Bible to give us the greatest story ever told. But what I need to do is fill you in a little bit before we get to her story, before we meet this extraordinary woman. The people of Israel, well, you might remember they were slaves in Egypt, and God rescues them. And then after wandering for 40 years in the wilderness, which is a bit longer than COVID, God leads them finally into the promised land. But here's the rub. There are already people there. People who could lead them to fall away from God's ways. And God's people didn't really need that much help falling into bad ways. So this pattern develops. God's people fail. God then allows them to fall into the hands of other people. The people cry out as they're oppressed, and God rescues them. And just before our story starts, this has happened again. They have fallen into the hands of King Jabin of Hazor in Canaan, and 20 years of oppression have just gone past. And the people cry out to God. So that was the landscape, if you like. But if we zoom in to a close-up, what do we see? It's a woman sitting under a tree. And the tree is called the Palm of Deborah. And that's her name. So you can see that she's fairly important to have the tree that she sits under named after her. And if you want to follow this story along in your Bible, you can go look at Judges 4 and 5. Deborah is known far and wide. People come to her for wisdom, and she judges between them. And such is her reputation and power, she is able to call a very important man to come talk to her at the crook of her finger. Barak. Now Barak was able to call 10,000 men to his command. So he's a pretty powerful dude. And Deborah says, come. And he comes to listen to her. And she gives him a command from God. Hear her voice. The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands. Now this mighty military commander, does he say, oh, come on, you're a woman, God wouldn't talk through you? Does he say, oh, I'm not going to listen to you, you're just a woman? No, he accepts that God has indeed spoken through her. And he accepts that she therefore has the right to give him commands. Neither of those things make him hesitate. No, but he does hesitate, because war is no small thing. So he says, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. See, he wants her strength with him. And I kind of understand Barak here, because Haven't you said to someone, and I've done this, when I've been going into an important meeting, I've said, look, wait, let's meet outside and go in together. I need someone with me. Deborah says, certainly I will go with you, but because of the course you are taking, the honour will not be yours. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. Now, here's a point at which you think you're getting a spoiler for later in the story. They're going to win, and it'll be due to a woman, Deborah. But are you getting a spoiler? Or will there be a plot twist? Let's just tuck that in our memories for later. But what's this course he is taking? Why is Barak being told off? Is his fault that he doesn't step up and be a man? But plenty of men in the Bible gladly accept women's aid, and this is a credit to them. So let's turn back a page in the story. She said to him, God commands you. But he said, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. So in response to a command of God, Barak sets a condition. He says, well, okay, God. All right, I'll do this thing. But only under this condition will I obey you. But Deborah has obeyed God without condition. Barak wants to set the terms. So what's the outcome? Well, this shows the wisdom and the humour of God. The punishment, if that's what we want to call it, is that Barak will have to share the glory. Now, if you think about it, he was always going to have to share the glory. Because God said, I, God, would lead the army into your hands. So who is worthy of honour here? Is it not God? In fact, this punishment for Barak is only a punishment if you want glory for yourself. But to his credit, Barak isn't put off by this. So off they go to a place called Kadesh. Now, some people don't care about these things, but for those who do, just come in. Kadesh was up near the north, near the modern day border of Israel and Lebanon. And for those who like these connections, that's the area of Galilee. You might know someone rather famous who comes from there. And the reasons that the soldiers would be from Zebulun and Naphtali is that those are the two tribes whose land is closest. So it makes sense, right? So Deborah and Barak have mustered their 10,000 men against Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army. And Sisera finds out about this. So he gets together all his men and 900 chariots with iron. Now, this doesn't mean much to us, but let me put that into perspective for you. Chariots generally were just a small proportion of an army. They were expensive. And you had a lot more foot soldiers. But chariots themselves, at the time, were the top grade military technology. So to say that there were 900 chariots and all of his men suggests this is an extremely scary army coming up against Deborah and Barak. And certainly in this story, Israel does not have any of this kind of high-grade military technology. So this is a stronger army. Sisera should win. Now there's some clever tactics going on. Deborah and Barak are wading up a mountain. And they can see what's going on. They can see all the chariots coming along and they plan their attack. And as they see this mighty army advance, it is Deborah who gives the command for attack. She says, go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? Barak, we know, has military skill. He's a general over thousands of men. But we see Deborah here is the military commander who commands the general. But we see the ultimate source of victory. The one who sent Barak, who spoke to Deborah. As Deborah herself says, the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. And so it happens. If the Lord's with you, Barak's army overwhelms Sisera's, and Sisera and the chariots and the men flee. And Sisera actually abandons his chariot and he flees on foot. So we have a contrast here with the brave leadership of Deborah and Sisera instead abandoning his men to their fate. They all, in fact, all of them die at the swords of Barak's army. But Sisera's looking after himself. So he does what a man on his luck does. He goes to find some allies. Now, you don't get to his position without some political nous. So he knows there is an alliance between his king, Jabin, and a clan chieftain, Heber. So he goes finds the tent of Heber's wife, Jael. And he thinks, beauty, I'm safe. Jael comes out to meet him. She invites him in. She shows him gracious hospitality. She covers him with a blanket. She brings him milk in the special cup, the one for special visitors. This is like me when I put ice in my guest drink on a hot summer's day, or I put some freshly baked cake next to the tea that I've got for my guest. And all of this hospitality makes him so confident in his welcome that he says to her, "Can you stand guard and make sure they don't find me?" And he falls asleep. Now, if you know how this kind of story usually goes, you might at this moment be more afraid for Jael. She's a woman, there's this military commander, he's in her tent. Maybe he's going to use his power against her. But now, think back to earlier in the story. Remember I said, take note. Deborah says that Sisera would be given into the hands of a woman. Listen to what happens next. Jael takes up the weapon she has to hand. So she hasn't prepared one. It's what's to hand, which is a tent peg. And she takes up a hammer. And she tiptoes over while he's sleeping so that he won't wake up. And she drives that tent peg so strongly through his head that it goes right through into the ground underneath. And not surprisingly, that killed him. That did the job. And this is the shock. Because Deborah said that Sisera would be vanquished at the hands of a woman. Now, you tend to think at the beginning of the story, she means herself, right? But I think maybe she meant Jael. Here we have, literally at the hands of a woman, driving the tent peg into his head. And after this has happened, and he's lying dead in the tent, crushed head, tent peg, Barak arrives. And Jael comes out to meet him and she says something like, "Have I got a present for you?" So we know that Jael isn't ignorant of what is going on here. She knows the main players here and she knows exactly what she has done. And she shows him Sisera, head crushed by the tent peg. Well, why did Jael do this? Maybe she quite sensibly thought, this is not a safe man to have in my tent. I need to deal with this. Maybe she was worried about her people as well. Not safe to have around her people, so she was acting for them. Or maybe she acted from loyalty. In fact, the Kenites, her people, were related to Moses by marriage and had been living in peace with the people of Judah. So whatever her husband's doing with his alliances, she could have been loyal to the Hebrew people instead. Maybe she was able to see who God was supporting, and that's why she helps God out. We don't know. But this we do know, that the ancient song of Deborah and Barak, which is in Judges 5, calls her the most blessed of women. And she has acted with courage and intelligence in a way which helps bring peace for the people of Israel, and probably, I think, for her own clan of people as well. Because this, after Jael acts, is the breaking point. After this, the general is dead, the soldiers and the chariots are lost, and so the tide of history turns against King Jabin. And while Jabin's oppression had lasted 20 years, the peace secured by Deborah, Barak, and Jael lasts 40, twice as long. What a victory. So no wonder Deborah and Barak celebrate with a song which then is remembered through the years. It's older than the book of Judges, and it's included in that book when it's written down. And they sing a song, not in praise of themselves, but in praise of God. In their song, it is God who acts. God marches out, and the mountains quake before him. God chooses leaders. And what leaders God chooses? Deborah and Barak and Jael are remembered as the victors chosen by God. And the tribes which fought are praised. And other tribes are remembered because they didn't risk their lives for this victory. And at the end, the song shows us Sisera's mother waiting for him as he doesn't come home. And her women are trying to make her feel better. So they're picturing for her what he's doing. They think, oh, he must have won. So, he's indulging in a bit of rape and enslaving and plundering. Don't worry, he'll be home soon. And what that reminds us is that all these evil acts, all the acts that go on for years under oppression, of women being raped, of people being enslaved, of all that they have being taken from them, these have been stopped because God acted through Deborah and Barak and Jael and the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali. It's an incredibly dramatic story. It's one of the most decisive victories in the whole of the Bible. And when you look at it, out of the leaders, the three main human characters involved in that victory, two are women. The impressive Deborah and the courageously strong, my goodness, she's strong, Jael. And interestingly enough, at least from my reading, Barak comes across as not quite as strong and not quite as brave as either Jael or Deborah. However, he too is used mightily by God. And actually it's because he has the underrated strengths of humility, recognizing when he needs help, and submission to the strengths of others like Deborah. Here is how the story finishes, with the final lines of Deborah's song. So may all your enemies perish, Lord. May all who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. Now, this story that I've just told you is often told as a piece of evidence in an argument. On one side, we're told that Deborah had to lead because men refused to step up. And on the other side, we're told that Deborah's strength is support for women in leadership. But when Deborah and Barak tell a story in their song, it's about God. God's commitment to justice. God seeing the plight of his people. God acting to rescue them. And Deborah, Barak and Jael all succeed because they are the agents of God's justice. In fact, the story that we're given in Deborah is actually the story that occurs again and again in the Book of Judges. But even amongst all those stories, this story really shines the brightest out of all of them. You see, before Deborah, you had three male judges. Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar. They're all military leaders who rescued Israel. But we don't know a lot more about them. After Deborah, straight after, we have a man called Gideon. You probably know him, a man of faith, but also, like Barak, a little bit hesitant. He finds it hard to trust God and puts out fleeces to test what God would want him to do. Of the judges who followed Gideon, 5 we're told little of, while the 2 others are Jephthah and Samson. Look, you can go look up their stories, but they're definitely flawed heroes. So in the company of the other judges and the stories told about them, Deborah does not come across as God's second choice because he couldn't get a man. Instead, interestingly, she stands above all of them as a model of faith and wisdom. I do think she tells us how God may use women. And it's good to hear, but she has more to say to us. She actually tells us of the wonderful way that God can use someone who trusts fully in him. She reminds us that trust in God is never misplaced. She calls us to remember that God chooses to bring justice through the faithfulness of his people in the world. And that can be us. And she reminds us that God's compassion for human beings can be answered through those who trust in the Lord, like Deborah. So this is what happens when I hear the story of Deborah again. I am moved, I'm inspired to be like her. Now, yes, she's a woman, I'm a woman. That speaks to me. But actually, when I read the Bible, I relate more to Moses' shyness, not wanting to speak, or Isaiah's feeling of his lack of worthiness. That seems more like me. That's more relatable. But rather, Deborah inspires me to live out the words of Paul that he wrote centuries later in the letter to the Galatians. In chapter 6, he said, "So let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for we will reap at harvest time if we do not give up. So then, whenever we have an opportunity, let us work for the good of all, and especially for those of the family of faith." Trust in God and serve him mightily. And that's the end of the story. Talk to you later.